Life is better than team sport. If anything, people can argue all day long about COVID or the origins or this, that, or the other, or vaccines. But what it really highlighted to me is that human beings are not designed to be isolated.
Guys, let me introduce you to our guest, Andy Stumpf. And Andy's got so many things we could spend like 20 minutes here introducing him. Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6, 2 world records, which I think are pretty cool that we can get into. Public
They're
speaker,
not.
public speaker, but also average dude with failures, mistakes, setbacks, and a lot of resiliency, a lot of never giving up, a lot of wins that have followed those, and they've been hard earned. So we're here today to talk about all things leadership, resiliency, getting back up, and a little bit of marriage and relationship stuff too. So, Andy, welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, one correction, and this is one of the most common things that I constantly get. I'm very proud of my time in the military. I'll start with that. And I think what has left a mark with me in my time in service was more the people that I served with more than anything that I did. But people often introduce me as, Andy Stumpf, Navy SEAL. And the reality is I'm not. I was a long time ago. I've been out of the military now for over 10 years. And I don't know the correct way. There's much debate inside of the SEAL online community as to what you are when you get out. Are you a former SEAL? Are you a retired SEAL? I just tell people that is what I did. That is what I used to do. And it's not who I am. So people introduce me as Andy Stumpf, Navy SEAL, and I correct them every time. I am not a Navy SEAL. I was a Navy SEAL a long time ago, and I look forward to the day that that is not all that I'm known for.
Well, I totally appreciate that, and it's good to for any man, no matter what we do, no matter what career field a man is in, not to make that his identity and to separate ourselves
Very
as
dangerous.
who we are from what we do. So I definitely appreciate that distinction. And now's a good time as any just to plug your website, but to make this point that you just said, if you go to andystumpf.com, I thought it was pretty cool how the big picture there right on the front is it's not a Navy SEAL picture, right? You go to the
I haven't been to that
website.
website in a while, even though it's my own. I was terrified where you're going with this. I can't remember what the picture is up there.
It's a wingsuit. It's a wingsuit picture.
That checks out. Yeah, that makes sense. I've
Yeah.
been a gravity enthusiast for quite some time.
Yeah, so it's like you standing on the ledge of a mountain wearing a wingsuit. You look like Batman or something.
Uh,
Um,
so I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that jump itself is called the High Nose, and that is in the Lauterbrunnen Valley in Switzerland, one of the most beautiful places I have ever been. Yeah, and that's from I don't know. That's got to be from 2014, 15, maybe.
so tell us a little bit about what are those world records?
Um, so let's see here. This is how great my life is. I lose grasp of. I'm aware that today is a Tuesday because I got the calendar alert for the show. Most days, I'm literally just rolling the dice. I'm like, is it Wednesday? No. Okay. So I think that was 2 years ago. I think we did this in 2023, which is wild to say that's 2 years ago now. Again, this was not my idea. A man named Mike Sorelli, who was also a SEAL in a previous life, hit me up with the idea. They wanted to partner with an organization called Folds of Honor, which is a tremendous organization. They focus on scholarships for people who are left behind. And what I like about them specifically is it's not just military, it's first responders. They're tying in that entire world. So fire, EMS. I actually think they work with first responders in any capacity because, one group that's often forgotten would be people who are answering 911 phone
Yeah,
calls. Those people are rolled into that as
that's right.
well.
The dispatchers.
You want to talk. Yeah, you want to talk about trauma that they are just on the receiving end of and they don't get much recognition. So his idea was let's do something big to try to gain awareness that we can use for fundraising. And I tell you what, if people think becoming a SEAL is something that is notable, it pales in comparison in difficulty to raising money. It
Hmm.
is truly the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life because, for one, we all have our own demands of life. right? And it's not really even about what you make, it's about what you spend. And a lot of people, to include myself at times, have spent just about everything that they make, maybe sometimes a little bit more,
Mm.
get a little credit card debt. And separating people from the money in their wallet is hard, especially depending on what they have going on in their life. And there's also a massive issue of donor fatigue. If you're on social
Yeah.
media platforms, you're seeing fundraising stuff almost every day. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate. It's just really hard if you're constantly bombarded with that to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit. So you got to do something that gets a little bit of attention. So Mike's idea was, hey, let's do a skydive on every continent, of which there are seven for people not very familiar with geography. Um, and I can tell you, there's no ice wall in my time in Antarctica. There's another roaring debate as to whether or not the Earth is
Hmm.
flat or round. I did not see the ice wall when I was down there, and that's where we started was in Antarctica because that's the largest variable in weather, is the most logistically complex. And I wasn't even aware that there were two records that we could have broken. Our goal was to do seven jumps in seven continents in 7 days. The previous record before that was a few months to be able to accomplish that. So we were, even if we had done it in 30 days, we would have broken the record. But the 777, right? This goes back into what can you do to grab people's attention?
Hmm.
Make something that's a little bit catchier. So seven continents, seven jumps, 7 days. We were able to successfully complete that, but there was another record that I wasn't aware of, which was six continents or five continents, one of those. So somewhere, which I actually have no clue where it's at, there is a certificate saying that I have a record and never hung it up. I actually don't know where it is, and I don't care because it was never about that. It was about trying to raise awareness for an organization that's given back to people who unfortunately have either lost a mother or a father or a brother.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you do other than to try to pass on those
Yeah.
legacies?
Man, that's a great endeavor. Definitely familiar with that organization, and they do a lot of great stuff. So, man,
Yeah.
that's
No,
awesome.
they're amazing.
Of all these accomplishments that you're kind of known for, and not necessarily making your
Mhm.
identity though, what are you the most proud of? Is there anything that you do hang up on your wall? Is there what's your favorite accomplishment?
Being a father,
Hmm.
which I don't know how you hang that up on a wall. I'm not,
You get a
nobody,
world's best dad coffee mug. I think that's what you do.
no, you see this? This is the trophy for being a parent to three kids. My oldest is 21, boy, 19-year-old boy, 16-year-old girl. Children are designed to chew on the bones of their parents. I did not
Mm.
have a lick of gray hair until I had a kid. Because nobody can really see. I'm sitting in the podcast studio right now, and I'm looking around. There's not a single military thing in here. I don't know where my uniforms are. They're probably in a closet somewhere gathering dust. I don't have a shadow box from anything in the military. Like I didn't hang up the certificate from the world record. To me, I guess I work on if you achieve something like that, that's great, but what's next? You know, instead of looking at, waking up in the morning and looking at a shadow box of what you've done, I think my personal take on that is, well, maybe you should just be looking at what else I still can be doing or what my next goal is. And I'm not saying anything negative about people who choose to, like, obviously be proud of your service, be proud of your
Sure.
accomplishments,
Yeah.
have those things. They've never just stuck. It just hasn't ever stuck with me. And you should be incredibly proud of those things. I just have always kind of been wired to look for what's
Yeah.
next.
Well, no, that makes sense. I think for sure there's a balance there. A lot of guys can get completely stuck and
Mhm.
spend their entire lives identifying themselves maybe as something that they did for a 4-year stint, you know, when they were 18 or 20, and that just becomes who they are for the rest of their lives. So, uh,
It
kudos.
happens in every career field, though.
Oh,
You know
for
what I mean? It's
sure.
it's for military people for sure, but I live in northwestern Montana. There's people who are wearing rodeo championship
Mm,
belt buckles from 40 years ago, which is awesome, right? But what if at the end of your lap around the track, the only thing you have to talk about is something you did 40 years ago? And I've seen it in the firefighter community. I've seen it in the first responder community for police, but I've also seen it in people who trade on Wall Street. They define themselves by the cut of their suit or the acronyms that are on a business card or their parking spot or the corner office. And again, live your life however you want to, But as you said when we started, there's a danger in attaching your identity to your occupation.
Yeah, man. I 100% agree with you about the difficulty of raising kids. That's certainly the most difficult thing I've ever done. And my I've got four, and their ages are kind of right in there with yours. From 21, 18, 17, and 14. And I like that quote. I don't know where that came from about children are designed to chew on the bones of their parents, but I was walking with a friend the other day talking about some struggles, and he said there's no pain like parent pain. And that seems to be my theme of this week for sure. So,
Just hope they don't find drugs, sex, and alcohol all in the same time. Like just it's a victory if you can maybe separate those things.
and
The world out there it's got teeth.
we don't know how this story ends, right? We're in the thick of we're still writing it right now. I don't know how this is
Yeah.
going to end, but hopefully they'll put me in a good rest home or come to my funeral or whatever. So you also in addition to these other things we're talking about. Before I get to this one thing, give our listeners a glimpse. What is the difference between being a Navy SEAL and being in SEAL Team
Mhm.
6? What is that? What
Okay.
does that take to make that jump?
Um, Probably less than people would think. I don't want to diminish the capability of that command and the people there in any way, but there's a couple ways that people from the outside would not understand the difference. So the initial SEAL pipeline, everybody who is a SEAL and gets issued a trident or earns a trident, which is a metal pin that you wear over your left breast, pocket actually on your dress uniforms. So everybody goes through BUDS, basic underwater demolition slash SEAL training. It's a 6 month long program. It's a crucible. It's not a learning course. You don't come out of there as some Jason Bourne or Janet Bourne, depending on how you would want to view it. Um, you're mentally tough and you probably got a good six pack for the last time in your life because all you do is run and do flutter kicks and probably not eat enough calories. And then you go into the operational SEAL community, which would be considered the white soft community or conventional or special operations command, SOCOM. If you want to in your career, there will probably be an opportunity for you to screen for the counterterrorism organization or JSOC version of the SEAL community, which would be SEAL Team 6. Now, everybody who screens for that is already a SEAL. So the pipeline and the core product that's going to go through that additional selection has already been refined, right? Like we've already gone through like the crucible of pain and suffering and whether or not we can make you quit. So in the way this is me describing what I think the selection course
Yeah,
is. This is not me talking for the military by any
right.
stretch. If BUDS is a test of your physical toughness or mental toughness more than anything, the selection process at development group is testing your ability to operate as a SEAL. Yes, you do physical things and you run and you do all but it's not that they're not there making you carry a telephone pole or a boat on your head trying to make you quit. They're testing your ability to shoot, move, and communicate. Can you do the core competencies or specifically the things that that command is tasked with doing, which is largely counterterrorism? So I think you lose about 40% of the guys because as much as people want to pretend that, human beings are created equal, we're not. Some people are better at performing certain skills and tasks, and some people can learn at a different rate than others, and that's just the way that it is. And if you don't make it through selection, you just go back to the SOCOM SEAL community. It's not a negative stain on your record. And a lot of people attempt it multiple times and eventually will make their way through. It just is what it is, right? Maybe you were in the middle of a tragedy with your family. Maybe you were a little bit too junior, just in the way you were conducting yourself or your thought process or your skill set. Just come back a little bit later on. For the guys that make it through, if if I were to break down the SEAL community, I would say you're tasked with doing 100 things. And this is a number that I'm making up to highlight a point.
Hmm.
You have to do 100 things. You got to be able to dive and jump and work in the jungle and work in the desert and work with, foreign internal defense to a degree and buy with and through and all of these things. If you get over to development group, you focus on counterterrorism operations. So let's say in the conventional teams, you're doing 100 things. At development group, you're doing five. And the reason I highlight that is if I take away all of the tasks that you used to be associated with doing, and if you have 100 things you're asked to do, you're going to probably be at best able to do them at a 60% capability because you're doing so many things and learning and training and currency. Well, if I only give you 5 things to focus on, you can get really, really good at those things. Then I'm going to layer on a support staff of somewhere between 10 to 15 support personnel per one operator at that command, a
Mm,
massive budget, training facilities, access to equipment, assets, all of those things. I mean, just think how good you could be if your job was to focus on any one thing. And that's the difference. It's the same people doing a slightly different job that is more targeted through a narrow band of responsibilities. And because it's a narrow band of responsibilities, they can focus on that heavily and they can specialize on those things. So it's the same people going through a different selection process. And at the end of that, you'll have a more targeted skill set that you spend all of your time trying to get really good at. That's the difference
mm.
between the two.
Man, that's really interesting description. I've never heard it put quite like that, and it just immediately makes me think about any organization, any team or ministry when you take unnecessary things off of someone's plate. That's a
Oh, yeah.
that's a really unique way to hear this elite organization described as it's one in which tons of things, other duties and responsibilities have been removed from their plate so that a smaller core group of proficiencies can really be focused on. You know, even we just had a meeting here in Men's Alliance this week where the top directors, we wrote down every single thing we do on note cards and put all the note cards out and like which ones can we get rid of? What things am I doing every week that I should stop doing or that someone else can do or that are
Yep.
wasting my time from the most important thing, right? So I think that's a huge lesson that we can probably apply across the board to a lot of different things that we're doing. I'm going to have to really chew on that. You've definitely given me something to think about there.
So the number one way that you could make that command less capable and less elite, which is not a term that I really heard anybody there use, but I understand why it might be viewed by that,
Hmm.
would be to give them more things to do.
Yeah,
That would be the number one way to dull that edge.
yeah, yeah. Mission drift.
I mean, not even mission drift. I would say add more missions,
Yeah,
right? Get them. I don't want to use the word distraction, but that's kind of what it is. If you, the less that an organization or individual can be tasked with focusing on, the sharper they can be. If you want to dull the blade, overwhelm them.
yeah. Okay. Now, I've always wanted to ask a dev guru guy this question. So
For clarity, I am not a dev group
you
guy. I
were,
spent 4 years there.
yeah,
The minimum amount of time there, it was a duty station along the way inside of my career. I can claim nothing other than I met the minimum criteria to be there and did the minimum amount of time there.
Roger that. So my question is, the Bin Laden raid. How
Mhm.
did the Navy Special Warfare get that mission over a Delta unit? Or do you even is this something
Um,
you even know about? I don't know. But speaking of giving different
I'm gonna have to
missions,
yeah. So I have to hypothesize there. I worked with and actually deployed with Delta or CAG, depending on what term you want to use. And they're fantastic. I have heard so many people trying to compare and contrast and
no,
who's
it's
better and
different
what
missions.
operations. It's actually largely the same. So JSOC was created because of the catastrophe Desert One, the original rescue mission
Yeah,
that went to hell when helicopters decided to fly into fuel bladders and fuel laden aircraft. And by decide, I mean accidentally. Nobody was like, hey, I have an
right.
idea. Let's see if we can fly this running helicopter into a C-130 full of gas. So JSOC was originally created. And there are multiple elements inside of JSOC, but I'll focus this on CAG and development group. The original idea for Delta Force was for aircraft raids. I don't know the exact word, but if there was a hostage situation on an airplane, which by the way is a horrible, horrible, horrible tactical situation, I can't even fathom trying to get inside of that tube with people knowing that you're coming. That was their original charter. Development group's original charter was cruise ships and taking down or boarding and taking down a cruise ship in, I guess, anywhere in the world. What's hilarious to me is that neither of those commands have ever done in real life the two mission sets that they were created for.
Hmm.
So, although, yes, by doctrine and design, they were split in that direction or focusing on any one thing, 98% of the stuff that they do is the same. When the global war on terrorism kicked off, there were too many things to do and not enough people to do them. So there was a broad overlay of mission sets. The CAD guys would be in Iraq and then Afghanistan. We would be in Iraq and Afghanistan. We would work side by side. We'd work independently. And I actually ended up doing a deployment with a squadron of Delta in 2005. There was a 6-man element that we sent with them from development groups. So there's a massive amount of overlay. So, although people think it is antagonistic, and you can definitely go onto YouTube or social media and you can find people from either command negatively talking about the other and who's better and all this stuff, which I don't understand because those guys were absolutely fantastic. I'm still great friends with some of the people that I did that deployment with. It's just an absolute waste. My hypothesis as to why that particular mission set at that particular time went to the Navy side of the house is that Delta was probably off busy doing something else.
Hmm.
There is a limited number of people at each one of those commands. And like I said, although there is the aircraft and there is the cruise ship,
Right.
other than that, like counter terrorist organizations or, counter, doing direct assaults and all those things, they're doing that all over the world. And so was development groups. They were largely doing the same things outside of that particular specialty that they were designed for. And I think it was probably just a matter of what they were doing in their rotational cycle versus what development group was doing in their rotational cycle. I don't think it would have mattered. I can say this again, this is a hypothesis. But if CAG had been tasked with doing that objective, it would have gone down exactly, the result would have been exactly the same. Maybe they would have sliced the pie slightly differently, but it would have been exactly the same result. And at that level, it could have gone to either one. And people like make an issue of, well, why these guys versus those? Like, I don't know. Probably because there wasn't enough of those guys versus these guys, or these guys were at an operational template somewhere else that didn't allow for it. Or maybe at that time, development group had been focusing a little bit more on Afghanistan because that's where the mission staged from. And maybe CAG was off focusing on Syria or, stuff over in the Horn of Africa. I don't
Yeah.
know. But it's not like, you know what I mean? There was no table where people are sitting around and probably arguing for it should be these people or that people. Like, here's the mission set, who's available to do it. I
Gotcha.
think that's how it came down.
Gotcha. No, that's really cool to hear. That's just something I've been curious about. I
Yeah.
want to ask you about what might have been one of your worst days at work. A day
Okay.
in when you were in Iraq. Tell us a little bit about that day and what happened in that recovery process coming back from that setback.
So I was actually on deployment with the CAD guys. We were hitting an objective. My element, or not, the element that I was a part of, it was not my element. I wasn't in charge of it by any shape. Um, I mean, this is almost 20 years ago too. So, take it through that lens. I remember that we were going after a kidnapping cell. I don't remember who they were trying to kidnap, but I, for whatever reason, remember that that was associated with the individuals that we were looking for. It was not an incredibly different night than any other night. We got to where we were going to start our patrol from in vehicles instead of helicopters, and we would often switch back and forth depending on how far we had to travel. Um, in process of trying to locate this particular cell, which is not always like, hey, this is the 1 meter square that they're in. We
Mm-hmm.
were having to look around for them a little bit. We ended up walking past the building and the compound that we eventually assaulted. Went down an alley, made a bunch of noise because people saw us and we pursued them. And shotguns going off, opening doors is relatively loud in the middle of the night. Worked our way back and geographically decided like, hey, this is the compound we're going to go into. So I'll stay out of tactics because it's just something that I always avoid talking about. We split up. to get ready to prosecute the target. I ended up going over a wall, and I was going to hold security for a good friend of mine who was going to put a breaching charge up. You're not going to send a breacher up to a door just by himself. You're going to send some people up there for the security element. And I never even got that far. As I was approaching the building, there was a window off to my left that was lit from the inside, which doesn't really help you with night vision goggles. Actually, you can wash out a lot of the stuff. And there was a window, there was a portion of the building that kind of came out. It was very similar actually to a residential house in the US that kind of looks like an L,
Mm-hmm.
like this is where people are living and this is the garage that sticks out. And there was a window right over here that was darked out, and I didn't want to turn my back on it until I had looked inside of it. And as soon as I turned my head, I mean, from what I was told by other people, a guy lifted an AK up and just started cracking rounds. I think the second round hit me and just flattened me. I mean, I just flat on my back, pulled around a corner by a good friend of mine. There's people love to hear war stories of, hey, then I crawled over and started pulling grenade pins with my teeth, and it was extended firefight. I was flat on my back. There was nothing heroic about it whatsoever. I think 8 people got hurt that night. Some of it was from a blue on blue. The breaching charge ended up hurting people that were internal, and to include people being injured from the firefight, both external and internal. So green zone to Balad, Balad to Germany, Germany back to Virginia Beach. And for me, the biggest issue was nerve damage. It's something I still suffer with today. My left ankle is not the best when it comes to stability. I roll it all the time, and I've kind of just learned how to deal with it. But it felt like my leg was dipped in gasoline for about a year and then just lit on fire, which during the daytime was manageable because I was busy. But what really got me was nighttime, when the distractions are all gone, except for that feeling of your leg just slowly smoldering.
Yeah.
And it was a nightmare. It took me, man, well, I still have nerve damage and I still have residual effects. So I can't say I completely recovered from it. I can say that I was able to figure out a way to work around it. But that probably took, from that command, I left and became a BUDS instructor, used that time to continue to rehab. 2 years, I would say. About a year of that on some pretty heavy medications that it took me a while to work myself off of. And then just physiologically trying to kind of just figuring out how to work around a leg that you can't feel that well and an ankle you can't control that well. So I'd say about 2 years, but it sucked. I mean, it was a nightmare. Really good opportunities for negative self-talk, really good opportunities to tell yourself that you're not going to be able to do something, to put obstacles in front of you for as far as you can see onto the horizon. And in my life, I found those are the most challenging ones. The obstacles that you set in front of yourself because you know what you don't want to hear, and then that's what you tell yourself. Other people trying to set up obstacles for you, they don't really know your triggers or the
Mm.
the stuff that really gets you. But it's amazing with your personal. It's like, wow, I actually kind of know myself really well, and I'm telling myself exactly what I don't want to hear, and I'm totally limiting my potential because of that. Yeah.
Man,
That's and to me, that's where I struggled. It's so easy to focus on things that other people do in my personal life. The obstacles I put in front of myself are always the ones that have been the most challenging.
man. When you talk about telling yourself the message that you don't want to hear, can you
Oh,
can you just give like an example to help wrap my mind around this?
sure, sure. Laying in bed shortly after, I get medevaced home, a couple weeks after I've been home, and you're laying in bed and you're not feeling great and you're numbed up a little bit from either pain, the pain meds or alcohol or a combination thereof. For clarity, that's not the prescription that I was given, but however, that is how I read the prescription. I
Right.
took what the doctor said and said, I think with my MD that I gave myself, that maybe I'll pair this up with a little bit of Jack Daniels. Actually, for me, it was Captain Morgan's Spice Rum, to be totally honest. And you're laying there and you're telling yourself, all you want to do is think about being able to recover. And all you want to do is go back to what it is that you were doing because you've worked really hard to get to that spot. And sitting there laying there telling yourself, you're like, you know what? Yeah, you're probably not going to get any better. You know what? You're probably done doing what you're doing. You're probably not going to be able to continue on this career path. Nobody's telling you that.
Mm.
You're just laying there staring at a ceiling fan in the middle of the night, talking to yourself like that. It's a recipe for disaster.
How did you combat that? How did you overcome that?
Recognize that I was an idiot. Yeah, I realized and recognized that I was an idiot. And honestly, talk to some people. Um, I have had immense value from counselors, therapy counselors. And honestly, I don't know the difference between a psych and a shrink. I know one can prescribe meds, but and counseling and talking to somebody who is not 6 inches from a problem that's destroying them and allowing you to objectively unpack how you may feel, and then somebody giving you objective feedback from a different angle on a problem that you're not able to see is pretty powerful.
Mm.
It's not always comfortable to talk about that stuff, but those tools are out there, and the ability to detach, it's really hard to solve the puzzle when you're so close to one single piece that you can't see the other ones. When somebody gives you a different angle and you can take a step back, you can start to put the pieces together, but you didn't even know that the other pieces that you needed to complete the puzzle were right there because you were too close to it. And that was probably the number one mechanism for me. And in talking to those people, they were talking a lot about this cycle of, the value or danger, I should say, of negative self-talk and being very careful with the lies that we tell ourselves. And the words that you use internally, because it can get out of control real fast.
Man, are you looking to obtain or upgrade your insurance? Well, let me tell you about Robert Kelly, call sign Risk. He is with On Track Insurance Solutions, and he can help you with home, auto, health, or even workers' comp insurance. You can contact Risk at 804-931-6646. Did you, at that time, did you have anybody else in your life, like a core group of friends, a band of brothers, that you were able to do that with as well, or was it pretty much relying on the counselor?
I didn't see the counselor that much. But when I came back from deployment, the rest of my squadron was still overseas. They didn't come back for months later.
Mm.
I mean, me having my deployment ended was irrelevant to everybody else that I was with. I mean, you're just a human body at some point, and they will replace you, regardless of how important you think your job is.
Yeah.
But I always had the core community of guys that I had worked with, even when I went to Buds, and which was a training capacity and a training command. You still had the cadre there that you could talk with stuff about. Some people are more willing to talk about things like that than others. And I never really push it. I think people need to be able to find their own way. What I have always made a point of doing is at least expressing to people and letting them know the impact that I have had from my own experiences. They can take that or leave it and do with it what they want to. But if it lights a fire under somebody for them to try something they may not have thought about before, I think that's a net win.
Sure, man. And it's interesting how after this you just mastered your own negative messages telling you to quit, and then you go to a job as an
Let's be careful with the term mastered. I still struggle with it. What I've learned to recognize is the structure in which the brain works, and more than you can't. I don't. What I've learned is you can't stop. I have stopped trying to control what I think. I
Mhm.
have stopped trying to control some things that I think about. What I try to control is to whether or not I grab onto it,
Right,
whether or not I want to attach myself to it. So, like, good luck trying to tell your brain to shut down and not think about stuff.
right.
I actually think it's wildly entertaining. I'll sit and I'm like, why am I thinking about this? The answer is, who cares? I'm not going to latch onto it. I'm just going to let that thing process itself out of my brain. That's the key. I haven't mastered it. I am working on, and will probably continue for the rest of my life, working on not grabbing onto the things that can have a very negative outcome.
No, that's good. I heard it said by a guy in an addiction recovery group, and this is the best I've ever heard it worded. He said, "You can't control what birds fly over your head, but you can control which ones make a nest in your hair." And I always
Yep.
think about that with thoughts, right? Like sometimes bizarre thoughts fly right into our minds. We can't control that. You can't stop it. You just got to let it fly right on by. Don't choose to let it live there, right?
Or take it for a ride for a while, see where it goes. It's like just, yeah.
Try it
At this
on.
point, it's like, wow, this. I mean, don't you don't have to try it on. You don't have to wear it like a leotard, but I mean, just let it go wild. Kind of watch the show for a little bit, and then just let it go. Watch the TV show, then turn the TV show off.
So you became a Buds instructor, where now one of your jobs is to try to get guys to quit, right?
My job was to apply the curriculum. The curriculum's job is to weed out people who either are not physically or psychologically robust enough to do the occupation.
So tell us some of the psychological tools that I think have to do with the resiliency piece of not giving up that you've just talked about.
Mhm.
And now we're kind of applying those in like the other side of that coin. What did you learn is a way that you can get guys to quit?
I mean, the most important thing that people have, like to continue the conversation, people have to grasp onto an anchor idea. And that idea is that nobody can make you quit, because that is such a common excuse. People will say, I did this because somebody did that, which is a slightly different version of nobody can make you quit. Like, you're not responsible for the things that happen around you in life or to the things that people say to you, but you're 100% responsible in how you react to it. And that's the anchor. So people will say, well, the instructor made me quit. And my question to that is, do you mean that they raised your hand for you and they somehow made you into a marionette puppet and forced you to verbalize the words, I drop on request, which is what you have to say in training? And then the instructor held your hand and he rang the bell 3 times? The answer to that question is always no. Nobody has ever done that to anyone. People make the choice to quit. Now, they might be cold. They might be wet. They might be tired. They might be hungry. It might be the combination of all those things. They might be in extreme physical discomfort. But let's be really clear. It's always a choice. No one can make you quit. As much as people in this world want to say that nothing in their life is their responsibility, and there are a lot of things that they're not accountable and responsible for, but your behavior, your actions, and your speech, you really are. You can't outsource those. So, as a buds instructor, you have tools. You have the water, right? You have the Pacific Ocean, which is not incredibly warm in the summer and it's pretty cold in the winter. You have sand. You have time, meaning you have how long the evolutions are. The students don't. You have the obstacle course. You got running. You got calisthenics, boats you can make them run around with, like really, really rudimentary tools. And some of those can be effective because they can just grind people down. But one really interesting thing that happens when you go back as an instructor that doesn't happen when you're a student. When you're in a class, my class started with 180 people, and we graduated with 18 of those 180. You don't see the people that quit because your training day continues and they are now starting an out processing. You might see them casually for a day or two, but I mean, they're gone. A guy you're running to breakfast with might not be there at lunch and you have no idea why.
Mm.
Well, you go back as an instructor and you interface with these people who have just made that decision, and they're there for about a week and they're in a pretty emotionally vulnerable state, and they'll talk with you. And I just started asking students, like, hey man, just give me the brass tacks. This isn't like instructor Stumpf versus the student. Like, what happened? And a lot of them were really willing to share. And the theme that I heard over and over and over and over again, there were some flyers like catastrophe in my family, I'm getting a divorce, like totally get it, come back. And that's another thing to remember too. You quit buds once, guess what? You can come back 2 or 3 times. It's not a one and done thing.
Mm.
So for those people who are having a life event, totally get it. Go fix the life event and then come back. The SEAL teams aren't going anywhere. For almost everybody else, there was one theme and one theme only. And it was verbalized slightly differently depending on the student, but it was being overwhelmed. They started viewing time as their biggest enemy. And by that, I mean where they were in training and how far away they were from graduation. The gap in between. Instead of being present in the moment, the only thing they could focus on was the distance between where they were and where they wanted to be. And when I recognized that, all of the other tools that I had available to me as an instructor became almost irrelevant. I would just start talking to people about time. How long can you be this cold?
Mm.
How long can you be this tired? You're on day 20 of a 183-day course. Let's start focusing on those other 160 days. When you started slamming the student's optic of time open, their likelihood of graduation just fell off a cliff. And that was it. That
Mm.
was probably the biggest thing that I learned. The success or failure of a student, in my opinion, has far more to do with how they view time and their ability to reduce whatever it is they're facing down into microscopic moments if they need to, and they can tolerate it and chew on it and focus on only the next step they need to take versus the next 1,000 steps. That's the difference between a student graduating and not.
The difference is the ability to focus on just the next step. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yep. Keep your world as small as possible. Who get, who cares what day of the week it is, as long as you see the end of the day and you're there in training the next day. If you don't have a calendar and you're not tracking it, guess what's going to happen eventually at some point? graduation. Who cares what day it is? Don't focus on it. I mean, just think about the difference between a student who takes it a day at a time versus a student that has 183 little sticky notes. And on the first one, it says 183 and then 182. And every day he wakes up and he pulls
Hmm.
one off. And he's like, oh, I'm exhausted. And that sticky note says 165. What I mean,
Hmm.
think about the difference from a headspace. Who is going to be more resilient in that moment? Who is going to have the appropriate headspace to focus on what they need to accomplish their goal? I'm going with the person who only looks at it a day at a time. And let's say a day is too big for people. Go a meal at a time. Let's say a meal at a time is too much for most people. Go an hour at a time. Let's say that's too much. Whatever it is you're doing right now, get through that and then focus on what comes next. There's no recipe. Like, how do you eat a whale? A bite at a time. Well, I don't know how big people's mouths are, so pick a bite that you can chew.
Yeah. This sounds so similar to, one of the major themes of AA is one day at a time,
Yeah.
right?
It's not rocket surgery. I didn't create any of this stuff.
Yeah.
You look at people, I honestly, I think you and I were talking before we started. I look at the world around me and we were talking about social media, about how you can, social media is optional and there literally are filters designed to make you either look different and you can choose what you put in your curated feed. And I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday because we were talking about a mutual friend that by all outward appearances is crushing life. They have the job, they have the money, they have the family. Well, what nobody knows is that most of that is falling apart behind the scenes. And I was thinking about us, and what I said to my wife last night was, we're all just like ducks. You see a duck on a body of water, and they look
Yeah.
happy and content, and they're holding their position. But you have no idea whether or not the current just underneath that duck, are they kicking as hard as they possibly can and are just holding station,
Yeah.
or are they barely using any effort? Nobody knows. You only see the duck on the top of the
Yeah.
surface. People are struggling. People are the world and the people that I see around me, they're constantly in turmoil. And I'm talking about myself in that same breath. The reality is you just don't know what anybody is going through in life. And it's so easy to make this snap judgment of, oh, must be nice, this, that, or the other, based off of what they put on social media.
Yeah.
It's taken me a long time in my life to get to that place where I realize that's a dangerous headspace. And I spend most of my time trying to, understand like what could, you get a negative reaction from somebody or somebody says something to you you don't like. When I was younger, it was instantaneous anger. And now I try to, sometimes that's still the case, let me be clear. But now I do my best to ask myself, well, what could possibly be going on in their life to make them have that reaction? What am I missing? What am I not seeing? And why don't I just give this person a little bit of grace instead of engaging with it?
Man, that's extremely powerful. Giving people grace. I read.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. Especially if it's somebody that you truly dislike. Like if you practice
Or
this.
somebody doing some, yeah, or somebody doing something like confronting you or challenging you. And this is again, these devices, right? These interactions online in a written medium that are horrible for
Hmm.
tone and intent and all of those things. You
Yeah.
can grab onto something that somebody you don't know says, and you want to get into this argument or interaction. And instead, don't, again, I'm guilty of doing that from time to time too, but instead just take a breath and think to yourself, okay, whether I agree with this person or not, if they're saying something that you consider to be horrendous, just ask yourself, what could have possibly happened in their life that could get them to that place? I bet you it sucks. And I bet you it's something that you wouldn't want to experience. So maybe just move on
Yeah.
because most outrage is completely optional.
Hmm. Boy, that's true. One of the messages that I have I have gotten from a book that I have told myself before. It's very powerful when somebody is wronged you, hurt you in some way. If you will tell yourself that person might be doing the very best that they can, that might be
Yep.
all they've got in them. That's a huge message to give people grace, especially like I said, when somebody's like coming after you, trying to hurt you, really trying to just twist that knife. If you tell yourself, hey, this guy might be doing the best he can, man, that just it just changes your heart really towards the guy.
I agree.
I want to ask you, what role, if any, has faith played in your life? Where are you at on that journey?
I have never been a religious or faithful person. I've been around it my entire life, and people ask me this sometimes, and I'm always just honest. It has never landed with me, and I don't claim by any stretch to have any answers. I think the best description for me would be that I'm agnostic. I'm not smart enough to know either way. My ex-wife used to like to go to church, and I would go with her. And I told her this, and I've said this publicly before. I'm envious of people that have that level of faith. I would sit around and I would watch and I would see people moved by what's going on, or maybe the connection of being there with people, or the message. And some of the messages are absolutely fantastic, but I can't fake faith.
Right.
People say, well, how do you know you're in love? I'm like, I know I'm in love with my wife because I can feel it. I'm like, well, that's how it is with religion. I'm like, I can
Hmm.
understand that analogy a little bit, but if it's not actually making me feel that way, I'm not being truthful in my reaction to whatever the message is. And maybe this is because it's not a I'm not at that time in my life where I'm supposed to find faith or religion. I don't know. It's not that I'm against it. I worked with some of the most devoutly faithful people that I've ever met. Um, I went to church when I was young. My mom took me to church. I went to Sunday school. Like, cool, I get it. And I think it's a fantastic framework for living your life. But I can't sit here and tell people that I have faith in something that I don't.
Yeah.
I completely and utterly am, I truly am, not jealous, but I'm envious of the faith that some people have. It's just never landed with me.
And yeah, no, I get that. I totally appreciate where you're at and the honesty there. And no one should ever fake it. No one should ever pretend to, feel a certain way. In fact, I would probably disagree a little bit with whoever it was that told you, it's based on a feeling like love. I know for me at least, it's
It was just
not.
their
Yeah,
metaphor. I
yeah,
mean, they're trying to connect to a metaphor that in their vernacular they could understand. And I get it broadly,
yeah,
but like you're about to say, like you feel it. You know what I mean? One you feel, and if the other one you don't feel that, the metaphor kind of falls apart a little
yeah.
bit.
I would say for me, there's a lot of days where I don't feel it when it comes to my belief in God. And goodness, if I were basing my belief in God on my feelings, that would not be safe. That would be my feelings change a lot, right? So
Yeah.
to me, it's not a feeling thing. It's more of a evidence thing for me. But that's just where I'm at because I've looked into certain things and I'm like, man, there's just so much overwhelming evidence that even when I question the existence of God and I don't feel the existence of God, I just fall back on looking at the evidence and I'm like, okay, based on the evidence, I'm going to believe. But I can totally appreciate where you're at. And I think, you know, you reminded me a little bit of the guy, the tattoo artist who gave me like all my ink because I've sat beside of him for 20 hours, and we've had these conversations, and he's a lot like you. He's like, I'm just open, but I don't really know, and I'm really not sure if anybody can know. So I appreciate that position because I think that position is very open minded and non dogmatic. So I mean, honestly,
Oh, I'm not against it
right,
at all. Like I said, it just maybe I'm not at a point in my life where it's supposed to land for me yet. I don't know.
right, okay. So I would just challenge you, um, before we move on here to a different topic, I would just challenge you because I've seen this be massively effective. Try just praying, say, God, if you are there, I would love to know it. I would love for you to make yourself real
Done
in
that
my
many
life.
times.
Have you?
Yeah.
Then,
No, I mean, this isn't the first conversation I've had about this. One of the guys I served with at Development Group was one of the most devoutly religious individuals who was raised by missionaries when he was younger, traveling the world, spreading the word of his parents' religion.
mm,
But we would sit there and play chess and talk deeply. And, he would ask me to read sections of the Bible. And I'm like, cool, like I'm totally open to it.
yeah.
But I just can't lie about whether or not it has landed with me.
Mm, okay. Cool. So you've just even despite praying, God, show yourself to me, you've never seen that.
I wish I could say I have, but I haven't yet.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure we touched on because it's such a part of our mission statement in Men's Alliance, sharpening men to be the husbands, fathers, and leaders God designed us to be. Tell us a little bit about lessons you've learned about how to become a better husband. Let's talk about being married and how we can be better husbands.
Let me be clear. I've been married twice. I am on my second marriage, so I'm obviously not very good at
Well, I
this.
don't know. You've got
Work in
you've got the
progress.
experience.
Um, you know, husband, father, leader, all of those things. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is before you start focusing on any of those things, you got to get right with yourself. At the end of the day, the person that you want to be or the person that you are is going to determine, like, if you are a broken person, you're probably not going to be a very good leader. If you're a broken person, you're probably not going to be a very good husband. And sometimes you have nothing to do with being broken.
Yeah.
I have hosted some podcasts with people. The last one I just did, actually this Monday, with a guy he was physically and sexually abused for 16 years as a
Mm.
kid. How that couldn't break somebody, I don't know. So he's not responsible for what happened to him, but what he has been able to do with that and his message and the work that he put in and the book that he wrote to try to tell people like, hey, you can come back from almost anything. That's what I'm talking about when I say, you have to get right with yourself, right? You need to do the work on yourself to be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. A lot of people choose not to do that. And I find a lot of the times, especially if it's something that cascades down generationally, it's like I don't like binaries, but it seems like there's two different versions of that. One is people pass it on, and others say, I'm never letting this pass on generationally again.
Right.
Obviously, I prefer the latter. Prefer the latter over the former. Um, you know, the biggest lesson I learned in my first marriage, if I could go back and give advice to my younger self, what I would tell my younger self is you probably should wait before getting married at the age of 23. Actually, I take that back. I got married at the age of, holy cow, I got married at the age of 22. We had our first kid when we were 23. I don't even recognize the young man I was when I was 23 years old. I'm not trying to talk people out of marriage, but I have, in a lot of time thinking about the person that I was, it's often possible to find a partner that you grow together in parallel, but it's also possible to find a partner where you grow apart. And there's work you can do to keep being parallel. And there are some consequences to the job I used to have, largely just time away, which provides opportunities for people to grow apart. And it's not that I'm not saying that I'm not responsible for my hand in that and pursuing the things that I wanted to,
Yeah.
but it's waiting a little bit. So I got remarried. I've been married. This will be our third anniversary in this August. My wife is in her 40s. I'm in my late 40s at this point. I have such a better idea of who I am. And again, actually, her and I were having this conversation last night as well, talking about just the statistics of people who get married later in life. The likelihood of them staying together is actually far better than people who get married when they're younger, which I don't understand the math behind that other than to say you have a better idea of who you are. And I think you have a better idea of how to communicate. You have a better idea of how to be honest, not only with somebody else, but probably with yourself. You've experienced a little bit more in life, so you have a greater context, a greater life experience, probably better communicational skills. God, I was an idiot when I was younger. Not intentionally an idiot. I just didn't know anything, but I thought I knew everything. And I wish I would have waited. Having said that, I would never change anything because of the kids that I have now.
Yeah.
But what sucks is that I had to put them through a divorce process that lasted 2 years. It was very contentious. And, I'll work the rest of my life to make sure that they didn't have any negative or long term consequences from just specifically that 2 year time period.
Yeah. We all learn so much as we go, and it's too bad we
Yeah.
only get one lap, right? I think we'd all do a lot better.
Yeah. Because I don't want to talk people out of getting married when they're young. But I also don't want people because, like, if you find your person, you found your person. But
Right.
don't, but when you're young, you don't know what you don't know. Just use with caution.
Yeah.
A year, even a year or two of life experience can make such a massive difference in a relationship, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I got married young. I was 21, and the crazy thing is, like, I wasn't wanting to get married. I certainly wasn't wanting to get married at 21, but it was like you just said, it was like, but I had my person. I wasn't trying to go get
Yep.
married, and this is like the plan that I had for my life was to get married at 21, but it was like, dang, I found her, and we've been dating 4 years. It's like, all right, I guess this is happening, right? So, um,
Yep.
what are some, if any, do you have any examples of something that you're going to do different on the second marriage that you're on, the second lap?
My biggest advice for people would be if there is any conflict or anything that's rubbing you the wrong way, find a way to communicate and just deal with it objectively, not emotionally, which is very difficult sometimes. But in my own experience, things don't get better when it comes to relationships if you give them more time. Having said that, I mean, like if you're in an argument, take a break and give it some
Right.
time. But if there is something that is eating at you, right? Like don't let arguments escalate. There's no reason to let that. If it gets to a place where emotionality is ruling the day instead of objectivity, just take a break. Like, hey, let's just come back to this. Guess what? We're still going to be married in an hour,
Mm-hmm.
even though you just told me that you hate me. Because I know at the end of the day, what that means is you actually love me more than anything. So let's just take a break, right? So come
Yeah.
back in a couple hours. But if you have something keeping you up at night or something that's really bothering you, verbalize it. Figure out a way to verbalize it, which can be tough because not all conversations are easy. And I think a lot of the time, the entry into that conversation or how you present what you want to talk about that can really set the path for whether a conversation is going to go well or it's going to go poorly. But don't let things fester at all.
I think that's really good. I always think of it in terms of like the unsolved problems, the conflicts that never get resolved or communicated. It's like a buried landmine in a relationship, and the more things that you don't address, eventually you find yourself in this relationship where you're so surrounded by these different landmines, these different off limit topics. Couples, they can't talk about anything at that point except for the weather.
Yeah.
It's like they've got a million areas where you can't go there. So we've got to like just keep that from happening by like exactly what you said, address it. It's not going to get better over time, right?
You'll be shocked how many times that the person you're talking to had no idea that you felt that way. And I've had this happen with friends, right? And just in casual, somebody will do something that is offensive or grifting to you and it just festers. And eventually you bring it up and the person goes, oh my God. Like, A, I don't even remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But B, I am so sorry that I made you feel that way. It was not my intent to make you feel that way. Like, it's not even on their radar. But for you, it's the only thing on your radar scope. It has shocked me the number of times that happened. Or I've been on the receiving end of that. Somebody like, I can't believe you said that to me. And I'll be like, I don't even remember saying that. But let me just tell you right now, like, I am incredibly sorry. I didn't mean to, like, however you're feeling right now, you're 100% justified. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Like, your spouse might be the same way. They may, if you don't tell them what makes you tick or what is bothering you, that human beings are capable of doing a lot of things. Mind reading and Bluetooth connections are two that I am not aware of human beings having the ability to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and our ability to know what our wife is thinking is even less likely. If they don't tell us what they need, there's zero chance we're guessing it. That's my experience.
And then the bigger problem is when they tell you what they need, but they actually mean something else because women are a riddle and they don't communicate like men do.
No, that's 100%. I need a checklist, right? I need them to. I need my wife to print
You need
and
a decoder ring.
laminate a checklist and give it to me. I can follow that.
Yeah.
Andy, I want to shift gears here and ask you a little bit about working in a team versus working solo.
Mhm. Sure.
Obviously, that's literally what the SEAL teams are referred to. Is it's all about teams. But in your experience, you've also done some stuff solo. I'm thinking, some of your world records, your jumping, your wingsuit activity.
Mhm.
When we take these experiences and we put them into just life goals outside of those little microcosms, what's your view on doing life with a team versus doing life solo?
Even when I was doing the jumping stuff, I almost was never by myself. If I might be on an exit point by myself, but I actually can't think of a jump trip that I did where I was ever solo. I would always go there with a friend. We would stay together. So there was always this aspect of collaboration. And we would use that, talking about the weather, talking about safety margins, talking about currency, talking about the local conditions, what we felt like doing. You know what I mean? So I can't ever really say, even in that, like when I step off of a cliff in the base jumping world, you're by yourself. You are either going to perform or you're not going to perform. Nobody's going to help you with that. I tell people the jump is optional. Everything that happens after that is mandatory.
I
So your performance is going to determine your lifespan after that.
like that.
Um, Life is better as a team sport. If anything, people can argue all day long about COVID or the origins or this, that, or the other, or vaccines. But what it really highlighted to me is that human beings are not designed to be isolated. The increase in mental health struggles.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's an escalator, but I think it looked more like an elevator. I think the stats I've seen is a 50% increase in not only the reported mental health struggles, and then I'm not a huge fan of pharmacology, but SSRI prescriptions and things of that nature, treating it through the traditional pharmacological routes, which I'm not saying there's not a role for that, but I think a better treatment is not to isolate yourself. Of course, take those things if your body is in a chemical place where it needs that to bridge a gap in how your brain is firing. But the people who seem to thrive the most are the ones that do life as a team, not the ones that do life as an individual. Now, there are some people who are very introverted and they're not interested in that, but I think that's probably statistically the norm. I think as a species, life is a team sport, man.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Um, I know I'm actually an introvert, which surprises people. I love being in huge groups. I love speaking in front of groups. Um, but I have to withdraw and go get some alone time to recharge, and then I can go back and do it again. But I do believe that even as an introvert, there has to be that balance. I know that when I'm alone for too long, just stewing in my own thoughts, that's never going to be a good thing. You lose that sort of, objectivity and that perspective that other good friends can speak into your life.
Yeah, you're talking about balancing what works for you, not isolation. I
Yeah,
don't think isolation is healthy. And if you can identify that you're an introvert and you can manage that, you can fill your cup up so it can be emptied a little bit at times, like you're talking about. And then
exactly.
you need to go fill it back up. But at no point in time are you talking about isolating and only doing life by yourself.
100%, 100%, right? In fact, I carry my challenge coin in my pocket that says isolation is terminal. So that's a reminder to me
Yeah.
that, hey, don't stay isolated. So Andy, I want to ask you a couple questions now that are just from some of our listeners. And
Oh
so,
boy.
guys, for if you're listening to this, we're gonna cut this next section. And if you want to hear these questions and these answers with Andy, you got to go to our website, and it's on our patched only section. So these are a little bit more
Yeah, take
fun.
that. This is secret
That's
information.
right.
You don't get this for free. This is
That's
secret.
right. This is it's still for free. It's still for free. You just got to go through our
Damn it.
training. Yeah, you just got to go through our
Fine.
class. But Andy, thanks for your time. It's andystumpf.com
Yeah.
and the Cleared Hot podcast as well. So we will link all these in the show notes. Thanks for your time, Andy.
Yeah, of course.
Hey guys, listen up. I've got huge news. This coming May 2nd through 4th, we are having our first ever Men's Alliance National Rally. This is going to be the biggest, greatest gathering of barbarian ambassadors from every tribe all over the country coming together for one weekend in a state park. You can come camp out or you can stay in a local hotel, but it is going to be an incredible time. We want every tribe across the country to road trip to this rally. We are bringing you the absolute best speakers in the country. Greg Kokel, author of Tactics, founder of Stand to Reason. He will be a headlining speaker along with Stephen Mansfield, New York Times bestselling author of Band of Brothers, which has helped me start Men's Alliance. He's also the author of Men on Fire. We're going to have Pastor Brian Hughes from Passion Community Church there leading us on Sunday morning worship service outdoors. It's going to be incredible. We're going to have the Barbarian Games at the rally Friday night with live metal music performed by Saved by Scarlet. Then Saturday morning is the first national all tribes. It's going to be epic. Go to our website, click on national rally. Get your tickets. It's going to fill up. It's going to be a great time of outdoor camping, music, workouts, speakers, and sharpening one another. Don't miss the rally. To find out more about what we're doing and to join us on our mission, go to men'salliancetribe.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review.